Did Paul eat pork? Well, one of the funniest things I've ever heard in a sermon was Pastor Tony Evans' imaginary description of the Apostle Paul eating pork for the first time. Now, Tony Evans is a vivid speaker, and he can be hysterical with some of his sermon illustrations. So during a sermon I heard him deliver many years ago, Dr. Evans explained that when Paul became a Christian, he no longer had to keep the Torah. And since Paul didn't have to keep the Torah anymore, he didn't have to keep kosher. So in his sermon, Dr. Evans playfully imagined what Paul's first time eating pork would have looked and sounded like. So he portrayed Paul licking his fingers and not being able to shovel the pork into his mouth fast enough. Again, if you know Tony Evans, you can imagine his description of Paul eating pork for the first time. It was quite entertaining. Well, while most people in Dr. Evans' audience understood that his depiction was dramatized, they may not have understood that his illustration was based on a flawed assumption. As a Jewish follower of Jesus and the apostle to the Gentiles, Paul kept the kosher dietary laws, and that means that Paul didn't eat pork. So according to James in Acts 21, Paul walked orderly and kept the Torah. So that testimony from James would make no sense if Paul ate pork, since consuming pork is an explicit violation of the kosher food laws that God gave the Jewish people in the Bible. Now, at this point, maybe you think I've got a good point about Acts 21, but what about what Jesus said in Mark 7:19 when he famously declared all foods clean? So typically that text is interpreted to mean that Jesus canceled the kosher dietary laws, thus making it okay for Paul and other Jews to eat pork and other non-kosher food. But Jesus wasn't negating the kosher dietary laws in Mark 7. Rather, he was critiquing some of his fellow Jews regarding their interpretation of the Torah. But Jesus wasn't dismissing the Torah or the kosher laws. But why does this even matter? Well, it matters because Paul is typically framed as an opponent of Judaism and the Torah. That not only distorts Paul, but it has led many Christians to see Torah commandments, like the dietary laws, in a negative light. But Paul loved the Torah, and he kept it until the day he died. So Tony Evans is welcome to enjoy a good pork barbecue sandwich, but Paul, he would have to take a pass on that, because as a Torah faithful Jew, Paul didn't eat pork. Hey, if you'd like to learn more about Paul and his Jewish and Greco-Roman context, check out my book, The Weird Apostle. You can find it on Amazon, and don't miss out on any of my new content by subscribing wherever you're watching or listening.